All right, we're finally back, and that was a longer 10 minutes than I thought. COMP1073, and it's week 10 of the winter 2016 semester, and we're talking about part 2. We've been talking about jQuery this morning, so that's what we've been working with, and we have a couple of these examples here that we've been using. One of them is to change the CSS, the CSS width, and again, remember what we talked about before when we used JavaScript. Unless it makes sense to do this kind of stuff, like, I mean, I'm giving this, really contrived example of changing a CSS style to 50% as an example. You'd want to do this with CSS first. Like, if I'm really targeting my form, what I should do is in my content CSS, kind of in my, my app.css, what I want to do is put it in here, right? I want to try and do as much work as I can with HTML5 and CSS first, right, before I start hammering it with JavaScript, because JavaScript is a little heavier. Right? Let's be honest with you. But this is, again, if you were going to do some kind of special effect, this is what I'm showing you. Or if I want to do this is more challenging to target with CSS, targeting the attribute of an element, right? It takes a little bit more work to do this, and this is just a little easier to be done with jQuery as opposed to JavaScript. So that's kind of cool, right? Again, you can see that I need these two lines, right, as an example, or I can do style.width. I can kind of do chaining here, and I can go style.width, document.getElement by ID form1, that style.width, is equal to 50%. I can do that in one line, but I still, need to create a some kind of variable to hold it. I could also just do document.getElement by ID and so on in one line, but it's a lot longer, and for some people, it's a little bit more complex. And that's why jQuery is so loved by people. It's a little bit more straightforward. Here's our selector, here's our method, and this is the stuff we're doing, right? Okay, let's get back. So again, some simple jQuery examples. Events is where jQuery really has a lot of power. And an example of this would be whatever the event method name is called, right? So an example of this is with my selector, I'm targeting a button, and then I do the event name, and then an anonymous function that's built into the event, just like we normally do an add event listener. This is the same kind of idea, right? So here's an example of the ready event. The ready event, it waits for the document itself to be ready. So we're actually targeting the document, right? When the document is ready, run this alert, right? Here's the short way, and this looks familiar, very familiar to us. In fact, what this is an IFI, self-executing function, right, that basically runs when the document is ready, right? So this is like creating we can use jQuery for our immediately invoked function expression equivalent instead of running it by hand with JavaScript. Myself, again, I'm kind of an old school guy when it comes to this, and I prefer this notation. It's a little bit simpler for me. Once you get used to it, it's something that's recognizable. It's not that difficult to use. But if you wanted to, I could change this whole expression so that it says when the document is ready, then do all this. That's what the same thing is. It's instead of executing by itself, it waits for the document to be ready and then executes everything inside, right? So that's one thing that it does. But jQuery is really powerful from a events perspective. So let's try this out. So we're going to say we're going to say jQuery find my button, right, which is my submit button. So ID of submit button. Right, because we kind of have that in our form already. And then what I want to do is on click, right, notice I have all the events here. If I press dot, I can do anything in here. So I'm looking for the click event, right, the click event method. And inside my click event, what I want to do is I want to kind of cast a anonymous function, right? So on click, let's do this anonymous function, right, to do something when I click onto it. This is equivalent to us. By the way, I can use a callback here. I can use a function name, a name function in here instead of an anonymous function. Let's do something, right? I want to submit my form, right? That's what I want to do it. I want to submit my form. Well, how can I do that? You can use jQuery for that. I can say jQuery, target, form1, right? And I can use the submit event, the submit method, right? And then I can kind of submit it. So that basically says submit my form. After my button's clicked, submit my form. Why would I'd rather do this as opposed to use a submit button? Let's go back to my index.html. Notice how I've coded it. I haven't made an input with a type of submit. I've actually added a regular little button. And what this does is it gives me more control. It allows me to not use the default behavior of a submit button to submit my form. Now, right now, my action is nothing. It doesn't do anything. I can put an action here, and I can also put a method, right? So my method, I can, maybe the get method. I'll use my get method here, right? So that's my get method, and I want to, post as an example to itself. Let's say I want to post to index.html. That's going to fail. But let me see if I put that. If I put like, / index.html or just index.html, that's my action. I want to make it go to itself. Let's see what that does. So if I go back to my document, so I go back to here, right? And I refresh, right? And if I click submit, right? It submits, right? And notice that username, I get this get. And usually what happens is I'm trying to submit to my own form, and my username is empty. If I put something in there, like Tom, and click submit, now I get Tom being sent. So actually it's submitting my form. And it's happening because of this little piece of jQuery that I've got in here that I made work. So I said on click, as an example, submit my form. Well, here's something that I could do. On click, not only just submit my form, but do other stuff too inside my little function, right? And you can see this coming, right? I'm going to take my form width of 50%, right? Let's make the form width 0, right? Right? Or even instead of form width 0, let's say my form itself display none. That's kind of weird, right? All right, my son is raging today. So I say, well, I want to use my display, right? It's spelled display, and the value of my display for my form is none, right? None. So as soon as I click my button, take away my form, and then submit my form. So then I have everything back. So my form only, kind of disappears as soon as I click my button. Let's see if this works. So refresh. There we go, and I click my button, and then, oh man, what happened? How come it? So Tom. 1 second. I'm going to click submit, and then it was gone and it came back, and it kind of erased what I had in it. Well, that's good. I did what I wanted to do, but this submit piece, when I go back, because of my form type, here's my index.html. My action is going back to itself, right? When it does that, it refreshes the screen. That's really what it's doing. If I want to change this, so I take away my action altogether, see what it does, and I refresh, and if I press submit, oh man, what's going on? Well, that's the default action, right? How about if I send it somewhere else? Like I send it to my projects.html. So projects.html, right? There we go. So right, save and refresh, and I put my name, Tom, and I click submit. Well, yeah, that's good, but the problem with that is that I could never tell if the form has been cleared, right? Let's go back. Because my form submission itself moves me from one page to the next. So nothing, no action. Or if I put the pound sign for default action, and if I go back and refresh and click submit, form's gone, right? So that function works, right? Because what's happening is, as soon as I click my button, it submits. So let's take a look. So here's my name, Tom, today. Submit, and then Tom is sent, right, as an example to where? To the, the pound sign, as an example, but it doesn't mean anything. And then it gets, well, hold on, what happens? So when I put data in there, Tom, and I click submit, it's gone and cleared. All right. But before, when I did that, let's refresh the form for a second. So we'll go kind of back, right to the original form. And let's just go and just put the form in here. So index.html, just to clear this up, the cache. There it is. If I click submit, right? Oh man, what the hell? How come it's still back? Well, again, because of the way the form works. When I submit the action, doesn't matter what I do, form gets resubmitted. How about if we take the form submission piece off? So if I go back to app.js, and I don't want to submit, so I kind of clock that out. As an example, I want to do some stuff. I want to get rid of the form first. Oh, yeah. We have people that are calling me in the middle of my class. I love it. So let's say I want to submit the form first, right? Here's I want to submit my form first. And when I submit my form, but before I submit the form, I want to clear it up. I want to display none. So it's up, fresh. No matter what I do now, if I click submit, it's gone, right? Even if I put the form in there. So I can kind of play around with this CSS here because I can do any kind of event, right? Here's another one. When I hover over my button, right? I want to change from blue, right? From this class, I want to change the whole class from blue, which is the primary. I want to change my class to red, which is the danger. right? Okay, all right. Now that's a little bit more challenging to do. Let's try that, right? So now this is on click. Well, let's do another event on hover. Maybe that's possible. So I say dot, again, let's just copy this piece here. So say, well, on hover, I want to make another event, right? So, and then if I say hover, here it is. If I hover over it, and I want to do a function, so when I hover over it, that the submit button, that I want to change the class, right? So instead of attribute, right? I want to change my class to something else. So how do I do that? So I want to target my my button, the button itself. So I want to target my button. So again, it's submit button. Okay, so here's my submit button, and I want to target the class itself. So I want to remove class or change my class. So if I go class, there's all the different ones: remove class or target class or whatever, or add class. I can add a class, right? Now it already has a class. It changes that. What about if I do attribute, right? And here's my attribute. And if I say my attribute is class, and what I want to do is I want to change the value of my class. So this is what I'm doing with my attribute. Instead of button default or button primary, I want to change my on hover. I want to change it to button danger. So as soon as I hover over my button, when I hover over, I want to change my class that's assigned to the button as button danger as opposed to button primary. Button primary makes it blue, button danger makes it red. Let's see if this works. So refresh, hover over, red. That doesn't go back, right? Because hover over and hover, and once I hover over, it changes my class forever. So instead of hover, how about mouse over and mouse out? Can I do that? So mouse over, change it to this, right? And just copy this out. So this is special effects, right? And mouse out. That's the other one. Mouse out. Mouse out. Then change it back to primary. So we can have a really funky effect. So as I hover over it, I have a danger. Be careful. You're going to submit. And then when I come back out of it, it's back to primary as an example. And again, I can make this. There's other colors too, not just primary and danger. Okay, so how do I do that? So let's go back, save, fresh, hover over, hover up, hover over. So the simple hover effects you can do. Again, the same thing you could have probably done with CSS. You know, a couple lines of some hover events here. Can do it with you can do that with jQuery. From the get-go, one thing that people don't like about jQuery is it's a little bit messy looking if you put it like this. I mean, we kind of put it in no particular order whatsoever. Notice, again, I'm not using any variables to affect everything. I'm just using simple jQuery to target. So I'm targeting my button. This is the first piece of jQuery. I'm listening for a type of event, right? Now, to do this in JavaScript, and let's just comment all this out for a second so I'll see what it looks like in JavaScript. And again, it's good to understand the difference. Right, so here's my jQuery stuff, my first mouse over. Let's do the same thing with JavaScript. So we'll say, all right, so we have to target the button. So how do I do that? First, I have to get a reference to the button. So it's like var, submit button. My button is equal to document.get element by ID, right? And we'll say get submit button. That's what it is, right? Now I could chain like I did before. So I could do the same thing that I'm doing up here. I could do instead of just using this variable submit button, I could continue to chain, but it's going to get pretty long. Notice how it's pretty short here, right? So let's just do it so it's 2 lines. You could, though, if you really want to. You could chain continuously by pressing the dot accessor method, but it becomes long and a little bit more difficult to read. If I wanted to do the exact same thing, though, it would be one of these. So I'm going to take this away, and I would do submit button, right? Dot add event listener. We look at mouse over, and then the function, anonymous function, and this is the line. Right now, it's the same stuff, but now we want to affect the attribute of and remove the class or change the class attribute of the submit button. So now we're going to go back to the submit button again. We're going to say again, document.get element by ID, unless you have a variable, right? document.getElement be sub button dot, and if I say attributes, right, or set attribute, and then it's the name of the attribute, so class, and the same idea, and then the value would be button danger. Right, so as I hover over it, so for the submit button, so this is the two lines, and notice that this is the jQuery, and this is the JavaScript. A little bit more challenging to read. To me, I'm okay with either one. To be honest with you, I'm okay with this one or this one. For you guys, you know, you have to choose which one you want to use. I'm telling you that jQuery is just a little bit more straightforward, and there's some additional things you can do with jQuery that makes many more lines here on JavaScript. Let's continue to write this so that you can see the difference between JavaScript. So this is the jQuery version, right? And this is the JavaScript version. So we'll kind of do one of these, JavaScript version. Right, and let's do the same thing. So I'm going to copy this whole line, right, and put that in there. And instead of mouse over, we'll do a mouse out event. So mouse out means when you move, mouse over means when I move my mouse over. It's pretty straightforward. Mouse out means when I take my mouse away. And then when I take my mouse away, I'm going to go back to a primary, right? And then how about this piece, this submit button click to display none? How do I do that, right? So it's a little bit more challenging to do. So we'll do the same thing. So we'll do document.getElement by, we'll take this whole piece here and let's modify it. We'll say this is click on the click event, right? And then what we want to try and do is we want to set the CSS to display none. So how do we do that? So take this away, some quoting things. So I've said CSS, right? And then it says the property that I want to affect, so display. And then the string, the property name that I want to affect. Oh, how do I set CSS? Right? So here's my property name, display, and then, you know, I want to affect it. So when I press comma, just like the same way, notice that I can put in a string, right? And I can say something like none. And I'm hoping this is how it's going to work. I'm not so sure this is the way you do it, right? And we're going to look at some other ways of doing this. For example, another way to take this, I'm going to copy this, cut this for a second. If I go to set, right, and I want to say, take a look at this, or if I go to class list, class name, get by class name, and if I do to style, that's the way I would do it. Style dot, you know, and then we look at this, the style, which would be display, right? And then style display, right, is equal to, that's the way to do it, none. And that's how you're kind of talking to style. It's the class, the CSS attribute of this. And just add, I'm just changing the display value, right, to none. So let's see if that works. That's so again a little bit more complex, but not much different. So refresh, and if I hover in, cool, hover out, goes back and click the button. Oh, what happened there? Right? I said my button's going away. That's not what I want. I want my submit button. It's got to be my my form 1. That's what's going to happen. So form 1. So my button, click the button. My form 1 goes away. That's what I want it to do. So let's refresh and submit. And now, what happened? How come? Even if I do this and if I hover over it and submit, it doesn't seem to want to go away. Style display is equal to none. Form 1. Get element by ID form 1. Get my style display. And change my. If you notice, it says my style declaration. Here's my display, and here's my style is none. I did none here. It seems to work over here, but doesn't work over here, right? Okay. How about let's see if I can do that. So change. Let's see if they have some stuff. So we'll say JavaScript set display none, right? Of element, right? So let's see if there's a difference to doing that, and if I didn't do it right. So style display properly, right? So style display done. See, should work, right? Get element by ID, but we're not living with a regular object, right? We're dealing with a form. And my submit button, although it's not a submit button to do anything with the form itself, and I've taken off this kind of event, what of course ends up happening is it's a form that I'm trying to get rid of when I'm clicking the button, and it's part of the form so that my JavaScript doesn't know what to do. It's kind of confused. I'm trying to get rid of the form while I'm clicking onto it, right? My form one. And the other thing is these other functions here take over. So I'm hovering over and hovering out. When I hover out, it brings the button back, right? And when it brings the button back, it kind of brings the form back too, which is kind of weird, but that's just the way JavaScript kind of gives a weird effect, whereas jQuery, clean, right? No problem. All right, let's just take this little thing here, cut it out and put it here, and we'll give some more examples. Any questions so far around what we're doing? So we'll go back to concept board for a second and see if there's any there's somebody that started a question, but the stream is frozen. Oh, thank you for that. Don't know why that is. The stream is frozen. So let's go back here, and it looks like it's okay on my end, but who knows if it's actually working on your end. Don't worry, I am recording this, so if the stream is frozen, okay, someone else is doing something. Let's put in. I'll put a little comment in here. So I'll say, seems to be okay on my end. Is it still frozen? Is it still frozen? Okay, and I'll pull this down. See if that stream's frozen, because it shouldn't be. Mine's working over here, but I don't know what it's actually looking at on the other side. So that was at 11:07. And hopefully that's still working. It's bizarre. Looks like it's working over here for me. So still broadcasting on my end. Might be just a little bit delayed, but we'll see how it goes. Lower your quality. Oh, okay. My quality is too high. I'll do my best. So so Matt, are you saying that when my quality is it's too slow? Is that what you're saying? It's when I'm uploading. It's the stream is out of sync. Is that what's happening, or is it works at 360p? Okay. So I'm not myself, from a Hangouts perspective, I don't have the ability to do that so easily on the fly, guys. So if you want to work it at 360p, that's totally cool. Not sure why it would work that high. I guess not sure if if maybe my broadcast isn't that great from home, even though I'm supposed to have 10 up and 100 down. Boo Rogers. Crashed on your end. So I was viewing it at 720p, and then it crashed on my end. Okay, that's bizarre that it crashed. Is it still crashed, guys, or can you still see me? What's the situation right now? I mean, you guys are saying it works. Is it still crashed, or is it still displaying? I'm not sure. Remember, it could be also the college there that's happening, right? So let's take that away. I'm not sure what you guys are seeing. Working now, just froze for one part. Okay, that's good. Yay. Not sure what happened there, but it could be the way things are going. So be patient, guys. I apologize again for the insanity, but this is kind of something new we're doing, right? So let's see. There's one more comment that I'll have. I guess some people are moving things around, and we'll talk about this. So in general, I'm not seeing comments about jQuery. I'm seeing comments around, hey, you know what, your stream isn't great. Well, that's all right. Hopefully you guys can bear with the quality differences. But remember, I will be uploading a cleaner version later on. Okay. So back to jQuery. So we've done some stuff. We've done some simple effects. Let's put back the regular version that we've got, the jQuery version, just to show you that works the way I want it to work without the submission for a second. So here's my form, and I'm going to go back to my page here for a second. So here's my page, and if I refresh, oh man, what's this uncut syntax error that I'm working with? Oh yeah, that would be bad. jQuery version. And let's go back and try that again. There we go. So back to normal, and if I hover over and hover out, that kind of works. I click submit. Hey, what happened? It was totally working before, and now when I click submit, it submits. Well, this is the funny thing we do when we have this form display. So the same kind of thing we're trying to get it to do with JavaScript. Again, I'm trying to make it display none in a form. It's kind of a weird, funky element to get rid of. What if I wanted to get rid of something else? something should be a little bit easier to do. So this welcome lesson 10 kind of thing. So I want to target the welcome. I remember that I did it up here. I said, var welcome text, but I can certainly do the same thing by targeting that as well. So instead of targeting welcome, so here's welcome. And I want to put this display, the CSS style of welcome will be set to none. So it'll disappear. Let's try this out. Refresh. I'm going to click submit. Oh man, what's going on? If I press Tom and submit. Why? Because my form itself, again, it's all back to the form. My form itself has an action that does nothing, right? And I'm clicking the submit button on my form. Here's something that I could do that's kind of a little bit weirder. I can take this button, right? It's not and unassociated with the form altogether. So just kind of kill it. So it's outside of the form. Put it inside my container though, right? Here's my form button. And then let's see what that looks like. What difference is. I click submit now. It does actually exactly what I want it to do. It's outside of the button. It looks like it's part of the form, but actually it's hovering by itself. So when I click onto it every single time, it's gone, right? Let's make another button that brings it back. So here's my, submit button, and then we'll kind of put another button in there. We'll call this the cancel button. And we'll make it side by side, right? So we'll call this cancel. And now let's see how it appears first. So refresh. And we'll make this cancel button, as an example, danger. So danger, cancel, or we'll make it, default. So it's kind of a gray color. So refresh. So there it is, submit or cancel. And when I click my cancel button, what I want to do is bring back the welcome, right? So go back to app.js, and let's get rid of this JavaScript version here altogether. And you see how we've got our submit button. We'll do another one, another little event, right? So when I do our cancel button, here we go. We'll change the display to block, which should bring everything back. Form submission for a second, because it's not part of the form. Okay. So one takes it away, the other one brings it back, right? So the cancel button brings the display back to block. Let's refresh. There's submit, gone, cancel, brings it back, right? So submit, cancel, submit, cancel. It keeps doing that. And again, you can create this gives us the ability to create user interfaces that are more responsive, more interactive. By the way, these events would work on mobile devices as well. And you can use this kind of situation to change things like navigation, taking away the default behavior of links, and making nav bars and everything else with jQuery as opposed to CSS. I don't recommend. I think it's still better just to use, if you're going to make custom behavior tied to these buttons, not just clicking and making things disappear and bringing them back, but actual other calculations. That's a totally different thing. Like, for example, if I click my submit button, right, as an example, or maybe I have a default, like, fill in default value button, right? So I say submit, default, and cancel, right? Okay. So what does that mean, right? Well, what I can do with it is I can have a default button. So let's put a default button in play. So index.html, go back here, I have my submit button, and we'll put a default button back and a cancel button. So here we go. Make this the default button, default settings. So your bit longer button, default settings. We'll call this the default button. And let's say our default settings, when I click on my default button, fills in my form for me. Okay. Okay, how do I do that? So go back, and we have the cancel button. We'll make another one of these. We'll call it the default button. Here we are. You by now, by using the syntax, you're getting used to it. That's why I'm doing this. And what I want to do is, when I click my default button, I want the form input, not the placeholder, but the actual value, the value of my form, to change to something else. So let's get this piece here. So I want when I click my default button, I don't want to change anything else. But what I want to do is, hopefully I styled it as a something else. I'll change the styling in a second. So I want to change the value, right, of my input button, the actual input itself. I want to change it to Tom. All right, so and you can change it to your whatever value you want. Let's see if that works. So again, as soon as I get I click on it, my value for my input form, the form 1 input, which is the first value of my input, and I could have changed this to something else, like for example, my username. And what I mean by that is, instead of doing that, I could have said my username input has an ID of username. Let's try that out. So ID, probably a better way of doing it too, username. So to target the username input, that's more like it, right? As opposed to the way I've been doing it so far. Let's go back to app.js. So instead of this, which is a, so that kind of selector, I probably better to do one of these, username. So username value is Tom. That's what I'm basically saying. Let's see if that works. So refresh. Oh man, default settings is blue. What's my button for Bootstrap? So I'll get Bootstrap. And I'm going to go back to components. And if we look at buttons, maybe that's CSS. CSS buttons, and there's some default values. So default. There's success. That's the one I wanted. Success or info, right? One of those two things for my. Well, there's also defaults. Maybe we'll make as the warning. We'll put warning on the. My son's breaking the place. I want to put my warning on my cancel button and my default on my default button. Yeah, makes sense. All right, so let's go back. So we'll go back to index.html, and we'll go back here to primary. We'll make this default. Again, this is just a style that's set up from Bootstrap, and this one will be warning. There we go. And then when I go back to my page, which is up here, and refresh, then I'll have 3 buttons: submit, default settings, and cancel. If I click default settings, it changes my username to Tom, and then I can submit it, right? Now, it doesn't really do anything, right? But I'm just showing you that I can submit the whole thing. How about if I want to get rid of the form so that, it looks like it's submitted, and change the buttons and everything else, or show or stop things? The jQuery and JavaScript do a great job of doing that. I mean, a lot of this you can do, I'll be honest with you can do a lot of this with CSS. And again, I'm all for that. If you can do something with CSS that doesn't require calculations, that's something else. But what if I want to get a random value, right? So here's something that we can get from CSS or JavaScript that you can't get with CSS so easily. When I click the default button, here's my default button. My value is Tom. That's cool. But plus, I want to get a random value in there of a number. Let's say, between, I don't know, 30 and, or I don't know, a random number, like your lucky number kind of thing is what's going to go in there. And so it says, instead of saying Tom's lucky number is, I don't know why I would do that, but let's just say, so I'll say Tom's, there we go, Tom's, so Tom's lucky number is, and then that's my username. I don't know why I would make that my username, but let's just say, right? And then plus some kind of different value. For example, I can do something like math.random, right, from 1 to 49, right, times 49 as an example. And then we'll add in, make this all into a order of operations here. Plus 1. So 1 to 49, right? And we'll also add in whatever this value is going to be. It's going to return the value of 1 to 49 here in the single line. So lucky number. Every time I click the default name number, I'm also going to get my lucky number. Cool. Maybe we can play with this, and instead of me being in the username value, I can change it to something else. All right. So refresh, and I click default settings, and my lucky number is 5.4. Blah 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 blah. That's kind of cool, but I want to make it so that it's again, I'm using the built-in math.random is the built-in method that comes with JavaScript to get a random number. Math.random by itself generates a number between 0 and 1, right? And a bunch of like a floating point number. So 0.395, you can see something like that. And then what I want to do is multiply it by 49, right? So if I get a number between 0 and 1, that's like 0 and 100%, right? Multiply by 49. So 0 and 100% of 49. And then I add 1 to it, right? And 1 to it means a number from 1 to 49. But this is 1 to 49 with a bunch of decimals. And what I probably want to do in here, right, inside this area, is do another math function, math floor. And math.floor, what it does is it says take this number that I'm going to get from 1 to 49 with a bunch of decimals and make it into an integer. So down actually. Okay, so refresh, and then whenever time I click my default settings now, I'm going to get a number from 1 to 49. But I mean, that's the stuff that we want to use JavaScript for. We don't care so much about modifying CSS. CSS modifications, I mean, that's cool, and transitions are cool and everything else, but we want to use CSS for that, not jQuery or JavaScript. Okay, cool. So just wanted to show you that kind of piece for functions. And event handling happens the same way. We can do the .ready function, the onClick function. Notice I did other things, hover. I also did mouse over, mouse out. There's many other ones that you can do. Now here's a question. Does mouse over and mouse out work for touch events? And the answer is no, it doesn't. So it wouldn't work on a mobile device at all, those kind of little functions. But nicely works on here in on the desktop. Any questions right now? Let's go back to our little concept board. All is good now. Class computer just froze up on us. Oh, there we go. So I thought it wasn't me, but yeah, it is what it is. Okay, let's go back to, so here's some simple event handler examples like I've given you, and I want to go back into filters. Okay, so this is something different than when we talk filters. It says it falls into some basic categories, and we've kind of seen some of this before. Basic, so like getting the first, last, and even. So how do I select? Selection is what we're talking about, selectors, right? Content to get, to get things based on content. So I can search content. That's kind of cool, right? Looks like I want to look at an element that contains a string. Visibility, right? So I can test to see if the item is visible or invisible. If it's display none or display just block as an example. An attribute, a child, a form. All kinds of stuff that gives us the ability for us to filter things with jQuery. I do that. Here's some useful filters. So I can do something like this. All elements with no children, including text nodes, right? Empty. Even. All elements with an even index within the selected set. So all even elements, right? So every second one as an example. And this would be really cool if I want to do things like I want to target instead of CSS, I can use I can color a list of elements, different colors. The first one would be regular color, like let's say white, and the second and every other one would be, let's say, a blue color, the background color of it. And I can do that with even elements, right? Here's some examples of stuff that you can do. So again, how to select the list elements that are the first child of their parent element. So list item. First child. This is the exact same thing we do in CSS. Again, these are just ways of when we say filter, we're using CSS pseudo classes and so on that are almost identical now to CSS. CSS has actually adopted some of this stuff back in the day when jQuery first came out. CSS still could do it, but it was more challenging, and people had a difficulty understanding what we can do here. But remember, we're not just changing styles. I can target the first child element and then change it. I can do DOM manipulation a lot easier with JavaScript and jQuery than I could ever do with CSS. Okay, so here's some useful methods, and we've kind of used some of these already. Next, so get the next sibling of an element, right? Previous, the previous sibling, so next or previous. Attribute we've already used, where you can get the attribute or set the attribute with attribute name and value. CSS, same thing. Add class, if I want to add a whole new class, right? If now it says add one or more classes to an element, and if necessary, create the class. If you use more than one class as a parameter, separate them with spaces. So this is kind of neat. So I can add classes to an object, right? Which is neat. And this is neat where, for example, if I want to test to whether to, depending on which page I'm in, I want to change the class. Okay, that's kind of a cool thing. So let's see how that can be used. So add class and remove class if you want to, or toggle class. If the class is present, remove it. Otherwise, add it. That's kind of cool. So how does this work? So if I go back to code, remember we had one of these problems when I was going into my index.html. Inside my list items, this is my navigation right here, right? In my navigation, I have to add this class active when I'm in the index.html, right? So I want to target this list item, right, which is the about me, or the here's my projects, if it's projects or whatever. How do I tell? How can I tell that on which page I'm on? As an example, well, remember that I also have a title that comes in here as well, and I can also set up a div tag, at the top that basically tells me what what my title of my document is. I could also set a body attribute, as an example, which is like name is equal to, I could do that as well. But however I do it, there's got to be a way of detecting what page I'm on, right? And depending on the page I'm on, I can set my class active of my element, right? So that's one thing I can do. I could search for the type of page I'm on. There's different ways of doing that, storing it up in a particular attribute somewhere. So I can search for an attribute, and depending on which attribute is loaded in, I can use the same JavaScript file to change my my list item here by adding a class. I can add the active class to this element. I guess that's where that would come into play if I was going to do that. Here's something: show and hide. That's interesting. Hide the selected element. The duration parameter can be slow, fast, or a number given the time in milliseconds. By default, the duration is 400. And slow is 600 milliseconds, and fast is 200 milliseconds. So hide and show. So that's kind of like making things disappear a little bit nicer than for me to say display is equal to none, right? This actually does a bit of a transition from what it sounds like. So show or hide. Okay, cool. Let's try this out. So I'm going to go back to here, and where we had our in our app.js, right, where we did display block. So show is what I'm really saying here, and this is display none, hide, right? So I say the welcome. When I click on this function, I want to hide my element, and I want to hide it, over a space of a certain number of durations. So the duration is a number; it's optional, right? And I can also say what I do when everything is complete. What do I do, right? So I can kind of put inside what happens, almost like a callback function when when it hides and it's complete. I can do something with it, right? So let's say I want to hide it over again 1,000 milliseconds. That's really slow, right? 1,000 milliseconds. And again, I want to bring it back. So I want to show instead of hide. I want to show an element that is, and I'll bring it back in 500 milliseconds, a little bit faster, right? Of course, the phone will ring when I'm here. Let's check this out. So just hide and show. Let's see what that does, and if it's any different than what we were doing before. So we'll go back, and we're going to look at the file here. By the way, this is a great opportunity when I come back here. If you have a question, interrupt me. I'm okay with that. Refresh, and when I click submit, right, as an example, then it kind of hides it, but it hides it in a nice little transition. If I click cancel, it brings it back. So hide and cancel. There we go. Almost looks the same, but that's kind of neat, eh? How it takes it away. So you can kind of hide or show elements. Well, if that's true, maybe we can hide and show the I can hide and show my form. Let's see how that works, right? So again, if here's my lucky number, blah blah, but instead of my element being welcome, let's target form 1 again. So here's form 1, save, and I go back and refresh, and then I can kind of do some special effects. So submit hides the form, there it's gone, right? So it submits it, cancel brings it back, default settings generates my lucky number as a default, right? Here's something, this is neat, but when I click onto it, when I click on the form, right? So when I click into this form element itself, I want this whole thing to be highlighted, so I can. I mean, this is just a trick to my username, right? So for default settings, it'll change it, but when I click in there again, it'll highlight everything to allow me to change it to something else. How do I do that with when I click in here? So a click event is what I need here for my input box, and my input box is username. That's what it is, right? So remember that if I go back to my index.html, I have my input box. So here's my my form, and my input control has an ID of username, so I can target username, right, like I did before. And what I want to say is when username is clicked, right, then I want to select everything, select all. A little bit trickier. Let's see how I can do this. So we're going to go back to this bunch of little events, right? And so we did a value change for username. That's what this is doing, right? With random values, right? But now when I actually click into the username itself, I want it to do something. So let's see how that works. So again, I want to say target. This is my selector. So I want to say username, right? And then I want to say when my username is clicked. It's also username change. You can also say change. See, I can on change, it'll do something as well. So on change. I can also do on click. So on click, when my username is clicked, what do I want it to do, right? So I can do a callback function again. So function, this is my anonymous function I'm going to do. So when I click in my username, I want to do something. I want to say my username. So again, I will do the same thing. Username dot, and I want to select all, right? So how do I select? How to select all with my username? Well, what am I selecting? I'm selecting my text of my username. So text, right? So my text value or text node, right? I got to be very careful here, right? My text value, right? So dot text is what I really want to put in there. Dot text dot, and then I want to do something. So I want to select all my text, right? I want to kind of focus my text on everything, right? Dot. Can I do focus? How do I do it, right? So if I can't remember how to do it, I can go up online, right? Do the same thing. Do another little search. So select all, and then for my input, JavaScript. How do I do that? Selecting all text and HTML text input when clicked. Okay, so it's going to give me a little bit of code. And if you notice, it says input on click this select, this dot select. Okay, and then this dot select range. These are interesting, but select and select range. This dot select. But it doesn't work with mobile Safari. In this case, you have to use this. It says so. It's kind of a fix, right? So on click, selection range 0 to this dot value dot length, whatever the value is, simple text, right? So that's interesting. But this dot select should work, right? This dot select. So let's see how I can do that. So text username dot select doesn't really work here. And how about dot select? Oh, that works. So dot select, trigger the select event of an element. Okay, cool. And it looks like there is some, I can put in a handler, right? So it gives me the ability for me to do this if I just put select. So username select. See if that works by itself, just by itself, select. Good. All right, let's go back. Let's kill some of these. Got some extra spaces in here we don't need. Let's go back to this one here, refresh. So again, default number, when I click in there, selects everything, right? Default settings, click in there, select everything. Click in there again, right? Default settings, click in there, select, right? So that does this little thing here. And jQuery fixes this up nicely, right? So when I click in, it selects it all. What else? What else can I do with little effects? I mean, a lot of this stuff here, and this is kind of where I really enjoy jQuery, is it's quick. And if you're not great at something like CSS, then jQuery is a nice companion to or a supplement of your CSS skills, right? Especially if you're using something like Bootstrap. You know, we don't want to mess with CSS. We just want to use JavaScript. If you're more of a programmer type, then jQuery is for you. And we've kind of done this before. We said, hey, get the value of an attribute, a source attribute, set the value of the source attribute. This is kind of cool too. If I want to change my source attribute, especially from an image source, I want to change my image source when I click onto it. Hey, I'm almost making I'm almost creating a rotator. I can rotate an image in and out depending when which button that I click, right? So I can change the image, you know, that I'm clicking in there. So if I have 5 buttons, maybe little thumbnails as an example of the image, I can create a rotator by having 5 images in there, right? 5 images, and as I click the little buttons, right, which are just look like little images themselves, right? What I can do is I can target it and I can swap in and out the image by changing the source of the image. It's kind of cool. That's the way we would do it. We're going to practice more image manipulation and stuff like that next week, because I want to focus in on that a little bit. We haven't really talked too much about images, especially with CSS and JavaScript. There's some really neat things you can do. By the way, again, this idea, by as I hover over or click an image, it swaps it out. CSS, I can do that with CSS now, and so it makes it so that jQuery is neat as an API, but it's not something that's 100% required all the time. Okay, here's something. Here's some event methods that are really cool that I've put over. We've tried some of them already. Mouse enter, mouse over, mouse out. Right, mouse enter. When the mouse pointer enters a selected element, that's kind of cool. Hover, and then the first event handler runs when the mouse pointer moves into an element. It's kind of simple when there's two, right? For this one, hover in and out, right? So you can kind of do all in one. Click, air, unload. So when the user closes the browser, I close the browser, I can do something. Even when I close the browser, on error. If something happens when an error occurs, I can actually do a little error check or whatever to do things, which is kind of cool, right? Again, I can toggle. The first handler runs even clicks of an element. When I click on something, it's like a click. So when I click onto it once, the first one runs. When I click on it again, or actually the odd handler runs. When I click on it the second time, the second one runs. So I can have two click events for the same one. Hey, this is cool. This toggle would allow us to do the same thing that we've done in two lines or two sets of controls with only one. So let's do that. So we have a toggle, right? We have a click event and a click event, right? When we click onto it, right? Here's my submit button click, right? When a submit button click, when I click into it, something happens. When I click out of it again, and I have to click a whole other button, it comes back, right? Well, it's almost like I want to have a hide and show, right? A button that changes when I hide and show instead of a submit button, because submit button is kind of weird, right? I want to be able to hide and show my form when I want to, right? Hide and show my form. So maybe I want to make a button that says hide, and then we'll kind of end it with this one. So just to give you an idea of some of the stuff we were doing here with jQuery, and we'll continue jQuery next week. I want to do more of this stuff so you understand jQuery a little more, and I'll give you a little lab to follow up or some kind of assignment. Okay, let's take a look. So again, in order for me to do this change, I need to make some changes to my index.html. So here's my index.html. And I've got a few buttons, a submit button, a default button, a cancel button, right? This is neat that we've been using it. I like my default button because I want to keep generating my lucky numbers for Lotto 649. Why not? But instead of my cancel button, let's change my cancel button to a show and hide, right? So right now we'll call this the the show button. And the default text that we'll have onto it is hide, right? Maybe we'll do this. We'll call this a toggle button. How about the toggle button? Toggle. Here we go. So the default is hide. So it'll show hide. That's the text that it's going to show, hide, right? And when I click, I click on the toggle button, right? And this is the warning button. We can also make this a success, right? But we'll leave it at warning. When I click on the hide button, right, it's going to hide my form, and the hide button's text will change to say show. So you can basically toggle between show and hide. Let's try this out. So I'm going to go back into my app.js. Here it is, right? And I wanted something different because there is no more cancel button. So where's my cancel button? Here it is, right? So instead of cancel button, we'll call this, we'll just use the space here, and we'll call this the toggle button. So toggle button. And instead of click, we'll change this to toggle. So let's get rid of this for a second and change this to toggle. There it is, toggle. And then we have two methods. One, the first method, which is happening on even, and the second one that happens on odd, right? So here's our second anonymous function. So my first function happens on even calls, right? So the second and fourth iteration. This one happens on odd, first and third, as an example. So on odd, what I wanted to do is form hide, right? So on odd. So here's my form hide. And what I want to do on even, right, I want to form show. So form show, right? Form show, form hide. And now we don't need this submit button click anymore, so we can get rid of this, right? This, we don't want that to happen. So it is not going to happen on submit button anymore. It's going to happen on my toggle button. But when I click the form on hide, I want to change my button, my toggle button text, right? So it's again, I'm targeting my toggle button. Here it is. I want to change my text value of my toggle button, the text button itself, right? I want to change it to something else. I want to set the text to show, right? So I hide it. I want to change my toggle button to show. When I show it, I want to change my toggle button back to hide, right? And you'll see how this works. So save. I don't think I have any more errors. No cancel buttons. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to go back to code, refresh. Now I should have a, well, what happened? Wow, it kind of worked right off the get-go, right? But my toggle, wait, what am I killing? I'm killing my form, not my toggle button, right? Hide and show. My whole form worked, which is not what I really wanted to do, right? So that's kind of an odd special effect that I kind of was doing. I don't want to definitely don't have my toggle button in there. Now notice that I have my the way I've set it up is my my username itself is what I'm toggling, but this didn't exactly do what I wanted to do, right? Let's see why this happens, right? So if I look at my toggle button, it's refresh, it's gone, it just goes by default, right? So so that's really weird, right? Because it's kind of basically saying that every iteration, depending if it's on or off, right, it's going to show or hide my form. But why is it killing my toggle button? Because the toggle button is not part of my form. Default settings, my submit button doesn't come back, and then I can't even do anything with that thing. It's just gone, right? And not only does it do that, but it also hides my button. So that kind of did a really weird effect. So how do I fix this? How do I fix this, right? I need to fix it by figuring out what the toggle button does, and I may have to split this up into two. But I was so excited about it because, you know, toggle on and off. So let's go jQuery toggle, right? And I want to toggle attribute. Let's see how it works. So here's my toggle for jQuery API documentation, and it tells me how this works. It says, here's the duration, and here's what happens when it completes. So something's changed since the last time we did this thing, right? So the duration is what's happening, right? And then what happens when it's complete, right? So that's the second function, right? And hopefully, we always want to see some examples of stuff. So we say, well, target, whatever the target is, toggle it, right? With no parameters, is the toggle method simply toggles the visibility of elements on and off. That's not what I want. I don't want that at all. I want it so that it doesn't toggle the elements. What I want it to do is, and see it says slow, man, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the click to go on and off. So that's not really what I wanted. Okay, so this is basically on click, right? Here's what's happening. On click, I got to detect whether it's depending on what my text is. If my text is hide, then do one thing, and then when my show, do something else. So keep this idea. So click, on click, right? And let's get rid of some of this stuff. On click, right? What I want to do is detect, depending if my my text, whatever my text is, if my text is hide, right? Then I want it to hide you know, what we've got going on here. We're going to hide my form. If my text is show, I want it to show my form. So let's try this out. So I'll say if, so it's going to be toggle button, text is equal to, and I can make it exactly equal to be safe, hide, right? Then what do I want it to do? Well, I want it to hide my button, and I want to show my text as show. So do one of these, right? If this works, right? Or else, if it's not hide, then show. Kind of a funny else statement. So here is for show. We'll change everything to hide, and we'll go into there. And we'll kind of show that in there as well. There we go. Just tab in there. Just format text. Just format the code to make it look nice. How about that? Okay. and we're going like so. So this is kind of like a click statement. That's really what I wanted. With little if, I was hoping that the toggle would do that. But what it's going to do is basically, if my text, the text of my toggle button, I'm going to check that. If it's hide, then hide everything. If it says something else, then show everything. All right, let's try this out and go back to my stuff here and see if it works. Refresh. Hey, it's back. It says hide. Click, show, click, hide, click, show, click. And that's kind of a neat little thing where you can kind of toggle in and out of a of a form, right? And I can still do my lucky numbers. Hey, my lucky numbers are still working. So today was all about an intro to jQuery, and I wanted you to understand the syntax. One other thing we did as a review was we also added in this type definition library, so tsd.d.ts, which gave us the type definition for jQuery to give us some code hinting, so that way we can use jQuery, but it gives us some functionality of how jQuery works without us having to always refer back to the API documentation, because that's kind of a pain in the ass. It slows down production, right? And it also gives us errors. If there's a problem with if the method doesn't exist, then it would tell us that the method doesn't exist. And it kind of gives us some code hinting on how it works. It's not perfect. It still needs some work. I would have loved to see more information here in Visual Studio Code about how jQuery works. But by the way, JavaScript and jQuery and other IDEs, except for maybe WebStorm, they don't give great code hinting. It's not built in, right? Like even Visual Studio itself, you need to add in some kind of type handling or type hinting in order for us to understand. Let me go back to my little log here and see if there's any questions on what we've done today. Any questions on this, guys? I'm just going back to the well for some more questions, right? Before we finish off for the day. Okay, I don't see any questions, but I want to wish you all a good long weekend. I know that people are going to have some good times this Easter weekend, and some of you may be celebrating. Other people may just be taking the time off, and that's fine too. Next week when we get back, please be prepared for and I was going to do this today, more of a quiz, but we'll talk about jQuery. We'll do a little bit of a quiz on jQuery next week. How to use selectors, how to select an object, and those kind of things. The things we talked about today, please refer to the PowerPoint presentation that's up on Blackboard to help you out. I think that's a kind of a good little reference card that you can look at. And again, you can always look up online if you want to try and incorporate jQuery into your workflow. Personally, for me, I like using both JavaScript and jQuery. At times, I change between the two, and it really depends whether or not it makes sense to use the shortcut. And again, always remember that if you can do something with CSS without using JavaScript or jQuery, that's always the preferred method, because it's quicker and it's lightweight. Okay, guys, thank you so much for bearing with us today in this broadcast. I know that it wasn't perfect, but hopefully when we get back next week, we'll be back to normal. Okay, thanks so much. Take care and see you soon.